Hey YouTube,
Welcome to our channel.
S here,
T here.
and we're here and we're gonna give you a little backstory on our childhood. All right, so our parents met in college. They fell in love. T was born. S was born, and then when I was S, who was S, and when I was 3 weeks, they left Texas to move to Indiana. Well, my mama did, and she left Texas with me and my sister to go to Indiana.
Okay, so from this point, now we're living in the projects in Indiana with our mother. We're living with our three other siblings because five of us. So we're living with our five other siblings. And basically, if you ever live in the projects, if anybody can relate to us, you can understand that it's a rough time. It's a bad area. Um, it's a rough experience. There was a certain point at time at night that you had to be in the house because they would start shooting every night. Also, we were limited on food. There was certain things. I mean, there was a lot of things we didn't have in our food. There was times when I remember only thing in our refrigerator would be peanut butter, and I love peanut butter till this day. So, yeah, it was just a hard time. So there's also times where I remember because S was really young. She don't remember she was a baby. I used to take care of her while she was a baby. Mind you, it's five of us in the household. So there was times when our mother would be abused by her boyfriends, her different boyfriends. And then there was times when she was the abuser to her different boyfriends. And we would see this throughout our childhood all the time. So this is all the stuff we would see when we lived with her. So and I remember, like, I can give like little viewpoints. I remember a time when there was a boyfriend that was abusing her and he dragged her down the stairs. I remember her hip being broken or hurt or whatever for a good while because, again, he dragged her down the stairs. I remember a guy putting a gun to her head trying to kill her. It was just a lot that went on in that household that us five kids living in that house should not have experienced. But that's what we went through. And then there was a time we had a sibling. She was a little young. She was a year older than S, and my mother, mind you, our mother used to abuse all of us, but we didn't know that at the time. We didn't think it was abuse, nor did I know it until like we were older, and then like our older siblings would tell us about it. So we didn't think nothing of it. We're just, thinking we're getting whooped like any other child would be, but we were actually being abused and neglected as kids. So we had a younger sibling. We'll call her D. That's the first initial of her name. So my mother did not want her at the end of the day. She just did not want her. And she asked the baby daddy, if he wanted her. He didn't want her either. And they decided to put her up for adoption. So that's how that went. And when I tell you, I do not have a lot of memory with her. I don't recall her being in any of my memories. And the memories I do have, I always remember her being in the corner. She was always on punishment. She was always sitting in the corner. I remember her being bald headed, which now I know she was like stressed out because she was being abused way more than we were being abused. Like all her anger was being taken out on her. So, yeah, she was being abused a lot. She was really stressed out. She was really tiny. But again, she never got to play with us. We all got to play. All four of us would get to play together, but she would be the only one in the corner. and I just don't remember. I just don't recall her in our memories. But again, um, that goes to show that she was just being neglected. So then she was put up for adoption. Then now the next memory I have is with us being in a studio apartment. I don't recall our bedroom. I don't recall anything other than one big old room and a bathroom. And in this same apartment, we didn't have any food. The only time we had food was when there was places around us, like restaurants and anything, that had free food available to us. Like Halloween. On Halloween, there was a Domino's pizza across the street from us that would give free pizza to you if you had a costume on. So we would go get a whole bunch of pizza and pretend like we're different kids every time just so we could have free pizza. So in there, again, in that same apartment, the studio apartment, we didn't have no food, so we would have peanut butter. So there was a time, if Devin, you want to tell the story, there was a time we were so hungry. We had nothing else to eat. So there was a time where me and S had we were so hungry we decided to eat a bunch of vitamins that my grandmother had gave her. So tell about the vitamins.
So we ate all the vitamins, and when our mom came home, uh, she was upset that we had ate all the vitamins, and she gave us all the whooping. And we, from my memory, I remember, because I was the youngest, of course, so I remember her coming home. She was upset, and we were running around, kind of like trying to scattering, kind of like roaches. We had roaches, but scattering like roaches because she was coming after all of us, trying to whoop us because we had ate the only thing we had in our house, which was the vitamins. Um,
And mind you, the only person that didn't get a whooping was our brother because he kept telling our mom that like he did not eat them. And mind you, neither one of us confessed that it was us two that had did it. But since when our mother, again, she was so abusive and she didn't care what we were saying, she just went ahead and whipped the rest of us three daughters at this point because now our D is gone. She was put up for adoption. So that's how that went. Okay, so then I remember a time when our mother, and I think, as I recall, I was the first person to realize our mother was on drugs. Now, if my older siblings knew that she was on drugs, I don't know, but I think I was the first person to know. So I remember walking into the kitchen. I remember her, and this is all I can remember from that. I remember walking into the kitchen and there was skillet on the stove, and she had a straw, and either she was sucking out of it or sniffing out of it, however the case may have been, because I don't know. But she was doing it. I remember calling my grandmother and I was telling her what she was doing, and then the next thing you know, our grandmother shows up, and that's when my grandmother realized that she had a problem. I don't know if she knew she had a problem beforehand, but that's another story for another day. But she knew she had a problem, and this is when we all started getting separated as siblings because we all had different fathers. So not all of us, but it was like the two firstborn siblings. They were separated, and we were separated, and they went to their father. And then me and S were separated, and we went to our grandmother, which is our father's side of the family. And then D was already sent off to be adopted with another family. So that's how that went. Then we used to visit. So now the situation would be we would visit, because we would visit each other family, like whichever family we were living with, we would visit that other side of the family that summer. So if we lived in Texas, we would visit the family in Indiana. If we lived in Indiana, we would visit the family in Texas. So now we're living in Texas, and we would visit the family in Indiana.
One summer, our mama came down to Texas and picked us up. And our grandmother in Texas thought she was just, taking us for the summer. But she picked us up for the summer and took us to Terre Haute. And she took us there, and she ended up keeping us there. And while we were there, we went through quite a lot of things. That is something we'll have to save for another time, because it goes a lot of detail. It needs to be gone into a lot of detail.
But our grandmother, she is the one who saved us from the traumatic experience. So we're going to tell one story from Terre Haute. One of the stories that I could tell you is to just give you an outlook before we tell you we're gonna have another series about Terre Haute, because we really don't like discussing it because it was such a traumatic experience for us. So one of the stories is, one time we went to a program that was there in Terre Haute for a bunch of kids, and we hung out. And I remember it being like late at night, and then we came home and nobody was at the house. I want to say it was late at night. It was dark, it was late, and it was no one at the house. So we're knocking on the door and nobody's there, nobody's answering it. And me and S was just banging on the door. We went to the front door, we went to the back door. Nobody's answering it. So we eventually had to break through the door. I don't know how we did it. Do you remember? I don't remember how we did it, but we broke through the door to get in, because otherwise we would have been sleeping on the porch. But that just goes to show how neglected we were. Like, we were little kids. She was in first grade. I think I was in, I don't even know what grade I was in. But we were really young. And for us to have to break through our own house that we're supposed to live in to get into the home because our parents are not home, that's a sad story in itself. So after that, our grandmother, my mother's boyfriend called our grandmother and told her what was going on. So at this point, our mother's back on drugs, if she hadn't already been. She's doing drugs really heavy. We would see her in and out. We wouldn't, there was days we would see her and days we wouldn't. So there was times where she would disappear for days. And her boyfriend called our grandmother to make sure, to let her know what was going on. So our grandmother came down to get us. At this point, mind you, she only came down to check up on us. But when she realized what was going on, he took her to the place where our mother was. She was at a drug house, basically. So we're all in a car, me, S, and her boyfriend at the time. We all pull up on the house, and her boyfriend at the time was like, this is the house, this is where she lives, or not lives, this is where she's staying right now, this is where she's been for the last couple of days. And our grandmother looks and she was like, okay, thank you for letting us know. So then after that, we go back to the house, get our stuff, and now we're going back to our grandmother's house. So now we're no longer living in Terre Haute. So now we're living with our grandmother. So when we moved in with our grandmother, my grandmother asked us if we wanted to live in Indiana or if we wanted to live back in Texas. And mind you, this was the options we were given. If you go back, live with your grandmother in Texas, you can never come back to live here or live with your mother again. Like, she will never get an option. Your grandmother's going to take you and she's going to keep you. Or you can live with us my grandmother in Indiana, and you can live with her until your mother figures it back out, because mind you, she's on drugs and she's trying to figure her life out. So at this time, me and S are really people pleasers. We're really young and we're just trying to please whoever, because mind you, we did not want to live with our mother where she asked us if we wanted to live to Terre Haute. We didn't. But we're people pleasers, so we were just like, yeah. And then now we're in Indiana and my grandmother's asking us the same thing. We're telling her the same thing, like, yeah, we want to live with you, but we really don't, because we want to go back to Texas, but we want to please you. So now we're living in Indiana. At this time, now I'm spazzing out big time. At this point, I don't know where my emotions are. I'm angry, I'm depressed, I'm confused. I'm depressed. Like, I don't understand what's going on in life. Like, I just don't get it. So there's things that I did in that household with my grandmother in Indiana. Like, I just can't explain. There's times I pulled out knives on her and my grandfather and my auntie. There's times that I pulled out belts and try to whoop them. Like, I'm going through so many different emotions, because I'm like, well, why can't I live with my mother? Why doesn't my mom love me enough to take care of me? Why doesn't my dad love me enough to take care of me? So I'm going through all these different emotions. I just can't understand it. So I'm just going out of control, basically. So now, at this point, our grandmother's putting us in therapy. So S is in therapy, I'm in therapy. So we're talking to several different therapists. So we had several different therapists before we found like a permanent therapist, because like we'll see a therapist and we wouldn't relate to that therapist. Like, there was one therapist to be like, oh, like this is this and this and that, and we just didn't like her. So then we'll move on to the next therapist. So we're just going through all these therapists. And mind you, in the time that I'm going through all this therapy, I'm fighting with my family. I'm fighting with my friends. I'm fighting with everybody, because I'm just going through so many different emotions. I just don't understand anything. So I'm fighting with S. I'm fighting with my grandmother. I'm fighting with my grandpa. I'm fighting with my auntie. Like, I'm just fighting with whoever's in my way. Like, whoever wants it, they can get it, basically. So I'm just going through so many different emotions that I can't understand it. So at this point, now my grandmother, she just can't handle it, because I'm doing so much and she's not used to it. So now at this point, she wants to send us back to Texas, because she's like, okay, I can't deal with it. This is just too much. This is too much for my household. This is something they're not used to, basically. So they decide to send us back to Texas. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like, that's where we wanted to go in the first place, or that's where I wanted to go in the first place. So she's like, okay, well, you've been too crazy. I don't know how many years we lived out there. Like 2, maybe 3. 3 years. And so we decide that, or I decide, or my grandmother decided for us that, it's time for us to go back. So now my grandmother from Texas is like, if you send them back, you're never getting them back, basically. Like, this is it. This is it. They're never coming back. So my grandmother was like, okay, well, we'll send T, but we want to keep S, because S is a good child, right?
Yeah.
So that's how the story went. So they wanted to keep S, but didn't want to keep me. So my grandmother in Texas is like, no. If we're taking one of them, we're taking both of them. We got to have them both. So then that's how that went about. And then And when we moved to Texas, then now I'm settling out in Texas, right? I'm going crazy in Texas. I'm doing the same thing. I'm angry. I'm depressed. I'm stressed. Like I got anxiety. Like I'm just going crazy per usual, like I was in Indiana. So I remember this one time, me and my grandmother got into it. She was telling me something to do, and I'll never forget. She was like beating me in my head. Like I don't know why I was over the sink. I don't know, but she was beating me over my head, and she was telling me something to do, and I'm like unbothered by it. I'm unfazed because at this point I done been abused so much. Like any whoopings, any hittings, like it does not faze me at this point. So I'm like whatever. But then I started thinking like this is the last place that we have to live. Like nobody else wants us, or at least me. Nobody else wants me. So I have to pull it together before, like, we don't have nowhere else to go because there was other people who offered to take us, but they had their own stuff going. So it was just like either you pull your stuff together or this is it. So after that, I did not even try to find my grandmother in Texas when she was doing all that stuff to me. Then S decided that she wanted to live in Indiana. So she wrote G a note.
Asking her if I could come move to Indiana with her so I could get a better start on life. And she gave me the opportunity to do that.
So then S went to go live in Indiana. I stayed in Texas. And that's just how life went from that point on. We'll tell like later stories on
more
how,
detail later on.
Yeah, we'll tell more other stories on how her life went the way it went and my life went the way it went. And we'll tell it later, and we'll tell more stories about how Terre Haute went because, but for both of us, Terre Haute was such a traumatic experience for the both of us. There's some parts we block out for me, for especially, and definitely for her. So later on, we'll tell our own separate stories, or even probably together, on how Terre Haute went for the both of us. And so for now, thanks for watching our video. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Yeah.
And we'll see you guys later.
See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.